Hello Year 11. This is the second lesson in your new booklet, Unit 2.4 on variation and evolution. Make sure you have your booklet in front of you and you need to turn to page 7, the page that says variation and has a picture of a plant on it. So what is this word variation? What does it mean? Well, variation or variety, can come about for two reasons. What are they? Children inherit characteristics from their parents. Each child inherits a different combination of characteristics from the father's sperm and the mother's egg. This is called inherited variation. Other characteristics can be affected by a person's surroundings, and we call this environmental variation. So this word variation or variety means differences. So people can be similar, but not identical to their parents or to each other. And these differences in a species are called variation. So for example, in a class, we've got 30 odd pupils and they will all be human. There's no aliens amongst you. And you will all have similarities in that you will have a head, hopefully 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth. But there will be differences between you. So you will have different colour hair, different colour eyes, different length hair, different shaped noses, different shaped features like ears. So as we said, people can either inherit characteristics from their parents. This is called inherited variation, or characteristics can be affected by a person's surroundings. This is called environmental variation. So to have a little think, pause the video and decide which kind of features are environmental and which are inherited. Usually living things look different because of either, as we said, the genes we inherit or changes in our environment. We call this genetic heritable variation or environmental variation. But usually it's a combination of both genetics and environment that determines the way we look or behave. So with inherited features, we can see a family here with mum, dad and the 2 children. And hopefully you should be able to see some similarities between the parents and the children and perhaps some differences. An organism's features can be inherited or caused by environmental factors. In order for it to be inherited, it has to have passed from the parents to the offspring. In all living things, the inherited features that are pass on in genetic material. So where is this genetic material found? In the nucleus, and particularly in the nucleus of gamete cells. Remember that word, gametes, is sperm and egg. So in actual fact, you're a combination of inherited features from both dad's sperm and mum's egg. So what about environmental variation? What kinds of things can cause that? So it's not just the genes that sometimes determine a person's characteristics. It's things like environmental causes of variation. What you eat, where you live, how much exercise or activity you do, your education, and illness and injury. So for example, hair colour is generally inherited. However, we can dye our hair, and our hair also changes colour as we get older. So in actual fact, hair colour can change over the years and can be caused by a mixture of both. The only time it is described as being only caused by genetic variation is when we describe our natural hair colour. The same with eye colour. Eye colour is caused by what you inherit. You cannot change your eye colour permanently. I know that there are sometimes adverts on the internet for laser treatment to change your eyes in terms of the colour. This would actually be very, very dangerous, and lots of people have lost their sight from paying huge amounts of money to attempt to try and change their eye colour permanently. You can change your eye colour temporarily with contact lenses, So I know at Halloween sometimes people put these in, but you cannot change your natural eye colour. So natural eye colour is caused by just what you inherit. However, your weight, okay, is controlled by a combination of these factors, both what you inherit, your genetic factors from your parents, but also the environment, what you eat, how much exercise or activity you do. Your metabolism in your body, again, is normally inherited, but is also controlled by how much activity you do, what you eat, where you live. All of these things will affect it also. Things like blood group is purely inherited. You cannot change your blood group type. So it is described that there are 4 things that are only truly inherited and not decided by the environment or not affected by the environment. So the 4 truly inherited characteristics are natural eye colour, natural hair colour, notice that word in front, your blood group, and certain inherited diseases. So what about things that are only caused by the environment? Well, let's say you fell off a bike when you were younger and you cut yourself. Let's hope it wasn't serious, okay? But you might have ended up with a scar. This scar is environmental. If you have children, the scar will not pass on to your offspring. If you have your ears pierced, then the piercing, the hole, will not pass on to your offspring. So it is environmental variation. Things like skill at languages and skill at certain sports and neat handwriting are all caused by the environment. Basically, if you grow up and somebody encourages you to do well in, let's say, languages or mathematics or in a particular sport, then it's likely that along with additional training, that you will get better. It is not purely caused by the environment. Some people argue that muscles, okay, for certain sports, okay, would be inherited or body frame, but this is not the case. It's about how the environment affects it. Tattoos would be environmental. They would not get passed on to offspring. Left or right-handedness is generally caused by what you inherit. However, at a very young age, you can actually train children to be almost, I suppose, ambidextrous. Ambidextrous means being able to write with both left or right, okay? So this is the difference between inherited and environmental. So your task on page 7, you have got a picture of a spider plant, and I've given you a slightly clearer picture here in the PowerPoint. Spider plants are very unique in that they reproduce in a certain way. They reproduce asexually. And we're going to be doing a whole lesson on asexual and sexual reproduction next. So we can see that coming off of the spider plant, there are these stems, and at the end of the stems, there are little baby spider plants. If we pulled one of those off and planted it into some soil with some water, they would grow into brand new spider plants. And what would be special about these baby spider plants is that they would all be genetically identical to the parent from which they came from. So spider plants are often kept in the house. They're house plants. They produce lots of baby spider plants by making these stems called runners from the parent plant. Every baby spider plant has inherited the characteristics of the parent plant, i.e. they have the same genes. So Linda's spider plant has lots of baby spider plants. She plants them and lets them grow ready to sell in the school fair. Linda expected all of the plants to be the same, because if they came from the same parent plant, they would be genetically identical. But some are bushier or taller than others. So list 4 environmental factors that could affect the growth of the plants. And then why do animals and plants of the same species vary? Pause the video for a moment and see if you can come up with 4 environmental factors that could affect the growth of plants. So, our spider plants, if we plant them in some soil, the reason why they could end up looking slightly different, even though they're genetically identical, is that some could have more light than others, so they would be carrying out more photosynthesis. Some might get watered more than others, so that they would be able to grow. Some might get more nutrients from the soil. Some might have a different amount of soil or a different type of soil. So these are generally the 4 environmental factors that could affect the growth of the plants, meaning that some are bushier or taller. Now, spider plants also can produce flowers. And when they produce flowers, the flowers will have male and female sex organs inside them, the stamens and the carpels. The stamens produce the male sex cell, the pollen, and the carpels produce the female sex cell, the ovules. And so spider plants can also reproduce sexually, just like animals can. Why do animals and plants of the same species then often vary? Well, in sexual reproduction, you have the joining, fertilization, or joining, be very careful not to say meeting, joining of the gametes. In other words, sperm and egg. And each of these sperm and egg would have different combinations of genes in the nucleus. So remember, they have half the number. They have a haploid number. And when they join together, they mix up the DNA of the 2 parents. So if the pollen from one spider plant got carried to a flower on another spider plant onto the stigma, then there would be mixing of different genes from the 2 different spider plants. So why do animals and plants of the same species vary? Because they inherit different genetic factors. So take a moment, write down the answer, make sure you've got the answer for the 4 environmental factors, as well as for why animals and plants of the same species vary. Your second task is a problem-solving task. Now, with twins, you can have 2 different types of twins. Either you can have the mother releases 2 eggs in one cycle, so these are supposed to represent eggs, okay, and 2 separate sperm would fertilize the 2 eggs. And these sperm and eggs joining together, okay, would then grow into twins. These would be described as non-identical twins. The reason being is that the mum's eggs that she's released have been created by meiosis, so have the dad's sperm, and so the DNA has been mixed up. These would not be the same. So with non-identical twins, you can have one twin is a different sex to the other. One could be male, one could be female. They both could be male, they both could be female. But the important difference between these types of twins and identical twins is they will not be genetically identical. Identical twins, mum releases 1 egg. Sorry, let's just go back. So mum releases 1 egg. 1 sperm fertilizes that egg. And then that fertilized egg starts to grow, divide by mitosis into 2 cells first, then 4, then 8, then 16, and so on. And for some reason, these cells separate. And as they separate, they start to grow into 2 new individuals. These 2 new individuals, okay, the embryos created from them, will be genetically identical. So, I can't spell, apologies. So identical twins have exactly the same genes as one another. However, they could have differences between them due to the environment they are exposed to. So there have been experiments where identical twins have been separated at birth, okay, and brought up in completely different manners to see if nature affects the way that twins develop as opposed to anything else. So they might have both inherited brown eyes. One may be better at sport than the other due to the environment, because they may practice the sport and exercise more than the other. So we've got 4 imaginary people here. The people, we're going to call them A, B, C and D. In our little table here, the X in the key means that it's positive for the characteristic. So the kinds of characteristics or features that I want you to look at are things like brown skin colour, the gender of the person, whether they're male or female, the ability to roll their tongue, whether they have natural brown hair, bleached hair or brown eyes. Use the information from the table to identify the two letters that are identical twins, and then explain your answer. And then I want you to tell me what factors can be attributed to both genetic and environmental factors. Pause the video, answer the questions in the spaces on page 8. So, did you find that it was twin A and B? If you did, that's wrong. The reason why A and B cannot be twins, even though they're both male, they both have brown skin, they both have brown hair, and they both have brown eyes, one can tongue roll and one can't. Tongue rolling is an inherited feature. It has absolutely no use to you whatsoever, but you cannot learn how to tongue roll. So B cannot be the twin of A. Instead, it has to be C. The reason why C is the twin of A, they're both male, they can both tongue roll, they both have natural brown hair, but C has bleached their hair, they both have brown eyes. The only difference is the skin colour of A and C, and perhaps A has been on holiday and got a tan. Skin colour is determined by both inherited features, but also environmental as well. And D definitely can't be a twin of any of A, B and C because D is a female. So they cannot be genetically identical. Genetically identical twins always have to be the same sex because they have exactly the same genes. And if one is male and one is female, one has bits that the other one hasn't got. So what factors can be attributed to both genetic and environmental factors? Our brown skin colour, our hair colour, not our natural hair colour, they are the only two out of this particular list. Turn over the page to page 9. Now, this is normally done as a practical task in school. We don't use real snails, but the data that we've collected, has come from scientists working in the field, collecting snails, by random sampling. This is what one of the snails might look like, and their name is, they're called sepia. They're common snails. Snails of two closely related species of sepia are common in both woodland areas and grassland areas in Britain. They show a pattern of variation called polymorphism. Now, if we take that word, the word poly means many, and morphism, if you think of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, means changes, or differences. So this word means many changes or many differences. So this means that there are several different types of this type of snail. The shell may either be yellow or pinky brown, and it may be dark stripes or plain. So we're going to describe the snails in 4 bands, or 4 types. Either pink/brown, yellow, plain, and the pink-brown are plain, pink/brown striped, and yellow striped. So this one here is yellow striped with brown. In this investigation, photographs of snails from each area, a woodland and a grassland area, will be categorised and counted to determine which variations of snails are most common in each area. So I've included these in the PowerPoint so you can see them. I'll come back to the method in a minute. So what we normally have is all of these snails have been printed on cards and they've been cut up and put into little pots. So we've got our imaginary pots of snails. So you can see that we've got a selection of snails here and you can see the differences, the colour. Some are plain, some are striped, some are yellow striped, some are pinky brown striped. I've got 3 areas of woodland. So woodland snails 1, woodland snails 2, woodland snails 3. And the reason why we've taken 3 areas is it's a repeat sample. So this is going to make our data a little bit more reliable. We've also got 3 areas of grassland where we've got some snails. So we can see grassland snails from area 1, grassland snails from area 2, and grassland snails from area 3. So all of these snails, these pictures of snails, I should say, have been put into pots, and the pots have been labelled up. And so each group in class normally would have a pot of snails, and they would do the following task. Let's say you had woodland 1 pot of snails. You would, in your group, tip the snails out onto the desk, the piece of paper. You would turn the paper over so that you couldn't see what types of snails there were, and randomly select 50 snails. You're then going to categorise the snails selected into one of the 4 different variants and count the number of each. You repeat steps 1 to 2 for the grassland snails as well. And we would do this with woodland 1, 2 and 3. So we get 3 lots of data for woodland, and grassland 1, 2 and 3. So we get 3 lots of data for grassland. And then we could average our results to make them more reliable. If we had one set of data that had some anomalies in it, we would leave that out. So I'm going to give you some data, some numbers that I've come up with. So this is out of 50. In the woodland, we found 18 out of 50 of plain yellow. Of striped yellow, we didn't find any. Of plain pink, we had 29. And of striped pink, we had 3. In the grassland area, we had 5 plain yellow, 32 striped yellow, 1 plain pink, and 12 striped pink. What I need you to do first of all is to calculate the percentage of each type of snail in the woodland and in the grassland area. If you're not sure how to do this, I'll go through the first one. So for plain yellow, you would do 18 divided by 50, because that was our total sample, and you would times it by 100. That should give you 36%. So I'll fill the first one in for you. Pause the video. I want you to calculate the percentages for the other numbers in both the woodland and in the grassland areas. So hopefully you've calculated your percentages. This second one here was nice and easy. It was 0. Our plain pink was 58. Our striped was 6. Our grassland plain yellow was 10%. Our striped yellow was 64. Our plain pink was 2. And our striped pink was 24%. So now you've got that data, I want you to draw some graphs of these results. Because our snail type is described as a categoric variable, and yet our percentages are continuous variables, the type of graph we would draw for this would be a bar chart. If you've got graph paper at home, brilliant. You can draw your bar charts by hand, and then you can stick them in on the opposite page. So I think that's page 10. Okay. If you haven't got graph paper to hand, there's an alternative way to do this. So I'm just going to pause my video for a second. And I'm going to go to a spreadsheet. Now, I'm going to put this spreadsheet, this Excel spreadsheet with the snail variation data onto Moodle for you. All you need to do is add in the percentages, and then you can use this, okay, to draw yourself a graph. So if you select the whole of the table, let's just select the whole of the table there. You click Insert, like I showed you in the first lesson. You click Recommended Charts, and obviously I haven't got the percentages column in there, but you should be able to get, okay, the differences in the plain yellow, striped yellow, plain pink, striped pink, okay, and obviously it would put the percentages there as well in different graphs. So you've got, this graph is probably the best one to use, the clustered column. You've got the numbers out of 50 as well as the percentage. So you can have a go at creating your bar graph using Excel. You can take a photo of it, you can save it, okay, you can print it off if you've got those kinds of facilities, and you can stick it into your book. So when we've drawn our bar chart, going back to our data, the second part is to analyse our results to reach a conclusion. So what you should have found, if I go back to my table again, here, we had here 36%, we had 0, we had 58%, and we had 6. So we had the highest number at 58 and 36% in the woodland of just the plain types of snails. So if I show you a plain snail, so this one here is plain, this one here is plain, this one here is plain, okay, in our woodland snails. But if we look at the grassland, we get the highest number of percentage of snails are striped. We've got 64% are striped yellow. So if I scroll through to a grassland area, you can instantly see on this card there are far more of the snails are striped and far less of them are plain. Now think about why you might get more stripy snails, particularly the yellow stripe, so these types of ones, in grassland area compared to woodland area. So in a grassland area, grass has this characteristic kind of like stripy look to it. And so these snails would be very well camouflaged. Because they're camouflaged, they're less likely to be seen by predators such as birds. So because they are less likely to be seen, less of the stripy version are going to get eaten. That means that more stripy version snails survive to breed and pass their genes on to the next generation. However, in our woodland areas, okay, if we look here, we've got far more plain snails. The stripy ones would stand out on perhaps the muddy woodland floor. They would be more visible, the stripy ones, to the predators like the birds, and so they are more likely to get eaten, leaving the plain ones behind. The plain ones survive, they breed and pass their genes on. So at the bottom of the page where you've stuck in the graphs, I know there aren't any lines, but can you write me a conclusion? I want you to link the types of snails, okay, to the area, which types of snails you find the highest percentage of in the two different areas, and explain why. Try to use keywords like camouflage, predators, that they're more likely to survive, to not be eaten by predators such as birds, to breed, and to pass their genes on. And that is the end of this lesson. Thank you, Year 11.